All right, let's talk about a word you see literally everywhere these days, sustainability. It's on your coffee cup, it's in corporate reports, it's everywhere. But what does it actually mean? And why is getting it right so much harder than it sounds? Kind of like a giant global puzzle. Let's dive in. So right off the bat, what is sustainability? I mean, really, if your first thought is, oh, it's recycling and planting trees, well, you're not wrong, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real story here, the real challenge, goes so much deeper than that. You see, at its heart, sustainability isn't really an environmental issue. Nope, it's a human issue. It's about a fundamental conflict that's been with us forever, something that's baked right into our DNA. And that conflict is the constant tug of war between what's good for me, right here, right now, and what's good for all of us down the road. And to really get our heads around this puzzle, we've got to jump back to 1968. There's this psychologist, Garrett Hardin, and he came up with a concept that is, well, it's the master key. It unlocks this whole thing. He called it the tragedy of the commons, and it explains exactly why we find it so hard to solve big problems together. Okay, so here's the official idea. The tragedy of the commons happens when you have a shared resource, like a public park, the fish in the ocean, even the air we breathe, and it gets ruined. But here's the crazy part. It's not ruined by villains. It's ruined by perfectly rational people, each acting in their own best interest, just taking a tiny bit more than their fair share. It's this epic showdown between what's good for me and what keeps the whole thing going for everyone. Let me break it down with a classic story. Picture this. There's a big, beautiful pasture, and it's open to all of us shepherds. Now I look at the field and I think, you know what? If I add just one more sheep to my flock, I get all the money from that sheep. That's a clear win for me, a solid +1. And the downside? Well, the pasture gets a tiny bit more chewed up, but that cost is shared by everybody. So for me, personally, it's just a tiny little minus. The math is simple, right? My gain is huge, my personal loss is tiny. So of course I add the sheep. But so does the shepherd next to me, and the one after her, and the one after him, until, poof, the pasture is gone. It's a wasteland, and we're all out of business. That, right there, is the tragedy in a nutshell. Okay, now take that little story about the pasture and scale it up, way up. Because today, our shared commons isn't just some grassy field. It's the entire planet, the oceans, the atmosphere, the forests, everything. We are all the shepherds now. The logic of the problem hasn't changed one bit, but the stakes, they couldn't be higher. And this really brings our modern version of the tragedy into sharp focus. Just look at where the greenhouse gases are coming from. Electricity, farming, industry, transportation. These aren't evil empires, right? This is the stuff that powers our lives. It's the lights in our homes, the food on our tables, the jobs we go to. Each one represents millions of tiny individual decisions, all adding up to put a massive strain on our shared atmosphere. And here's another thing. The number of us shepherds on this global pasture, it's about to get a lot more crowded. We're looking at nearly 10 billion people by 2050, and every single one of them wants and totally deserves a safe, comfortable life. But in the system we've built, that often means more consumption, more energy, more pressure on the commons. And please, don't think for a second this is some abstract environmental issue for the future. It's not. When the shared resources we all depend on, like stable food supplies or clean water, start to break down, the consequences are incredibly real and incredibly human. This quote from the UN says it all. Scarcity doesn't just create hardship, it can literally ignite conflict. The tragedy stops being a theory and starts becoming a reality fast. Okay, so that's the problem. It's big, it's messy, and it seems to be hardwired into how we think. It's a real dilemma. So, what do? How on earth do we start to fix this? Well, the key is to stop thinking about it as one single problem to be solved. We need to start looking at it through a new set of lenses. And this is the big mental shift we have to make. If you try to solve the tragedy by only focusing on one piece of the puzzle, let's say just technology or just new laws, you're gonna fail. It's just doomed from the start. Why? Because all these pieces are connected. You have to step back and see the whole board, the whole system, all at once. Which brings us to this incredibly useful framework. The idea is that real sustainability, the kind that actually lasts, has to stand on 3 legs. It has to balance the needs of society, the economy, and the environment. Think of it like a 3-legged stool. You kick out any one of those legs and the whole thing comes crashing down. They are a total package deal. So first up, let's look through the society lens. This is all about us, people. Any solution, any plan has to be fair, it has to be just, it has to actually work for people, not against them. It means asking, how does this affect real communities? Does this promote peace and security? You simply can't build a sustainable future on a foundation of inequality. It just won't work. Okay, next lens, the economy. And this is about the machinery of how we make, buy, and sell things. This isn't just about making money, it's about changing the rules of how money is made. It's about weaving sustainability right into the fabric of our financial system. We start asking different questions, like how can my investment actually help the planet? Or what's the real dollar value of clean air? It's a massive shift in thinking. And yeah, it kind of leads to the wild idea that accountants might just be the ones to save the world. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote from Peter Backer at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is just awesome. Only accountants can save the world. It sounds kind of funny, but he's making a deadly serious point. The people who track the flow of money, the ones who define profit and loss, they have unbelievable power. If they start counting the real costs and benefits to society and the environment, they can literally redirect the entire global economy. And last, but in many ways first, is the environmental perspective. This is the bedrock. This is the lens that reminds us of a simple, non-negotiable fact. We live on one planet. It has limits. It's governed by the laws of physics and biology, not the laws of economics. This perspective forces us to remember that we are completely dependent on nature for everything. Air, water, food, it all comes from here. So let's recap. We have the problem, the tragedy of the commons, and we have a framework for the solution, thinking through those 3 lenses of society, economy, and environment. But that's all a bit theoretical, right? So what does it actually look like when you put it all together in the real world? Well, what happens is that when you start using all 3 of those lenses at the same time, you can finally move beyond fuzzy goals like, let's be more green. You can start creating real concrete action plans with measurable targets. It's how you turn a good intention into a great policy. And here is a fantastic real-world example, the Singapore Green Plan 2030. Notice how this isn't just one giant vague goal. It's a whole collection of very specific targets that hit all 3 of our pillars. Every household within a 10-minute walk from a park, that's a social goal for quality of life. Green 80% of buildings, that's a huge economic and industry target. And produce 30% of their own food, that's a powerful environmental goal about resilience. You see, it's the whole puzzle, all the pieces working together. And so we come full circle, right back to where we started, that fundamental tension between me and we. The tragedy of the commons is the warning. It shows us how perfectly logical individual choices can add up to a collective nightmare. This 3-lens way of thinking, well, it's the map that might help us find a way out. But it all boils down to one final massive question. In a world of billions of individuals all chasing their own +1, how do we finally truly solve for us?